So basically, everyone and his mother has been talking about the outrageous 80 USD price tag for The Outer Worlds 2, a game that is clearly AA in quality, that demands a price greater than the most expensive AAA games out there. And to add insult to injury, of course, you have the stupid talk about capitalism and how it's really bad, and how you're supposed to support capitalism by spending that amount of money on the game. Now, everyone and his mother is also mentioning the obvious fact that the reason why the game is priced the way it is because it is meant to be played on Game Pass. This appears to be the long-term strategy of the multi-trillion-dollar company Microsoft. Basically, put games out. If people want to spend $80 or $90 or $100 on them, let them. But they can also play it on Game Pass for a much cheaper price. And we all know how it works with subscription-based models. You basically subscribe for a month, and usually what happens is people forget that they subscribed, or they decide to continue it. And either way, in time, Microsoft makes all the money back that they would have lost, comparatively speaking. And of course, there's always going to be a small subset of people who will buy the game for, say, $80 in this case. And obviously, 80 USD is a ridiculous price for this game. However, since everyone's already talking about this, and given the fact that almost everyone talking about this game and the $80 you have to pay for it potentially is representing an American viewpoint, I thought it would be useful as a European to talk about the elephant in the room, namely the fact that we in Europe have to pay much higher prices for video games than you do in the United States. And the price is always higher here, but there are of course different currency zones in Europe. I happen to live in the Eurozone, but there are other ones. And if you look up on the screen, and what I'm showing you right now, you can see comparatively speaking in Europe that we all pay more money than you do in the United States for The Outer Worlds 2. In fact, in every instance, as you can see, we pay more than $90 equivalent USD for your $80 USD for the same game. And this doesn't just apply to The Outer Worlds 2. It applies to every conceivable game under the sun. Because never in all my time on Earth, since the introduction of the euro, and I'm old enough to remember the time before the euro, have they ever adjusted the currency locally in terms of euro to dollar or dollar to euro to make it make sense. So if something is $80 in the US, it will be 90 plus equivalent in the European Union or in the Eurozone. And you can see, for example, in the other currency zones, in the case of, say, our brothers in Poland, who are paying in their own currency, they have to pay even more. The Brits have to pay even more than the Poles. And if you're living in Switzerland, of course, you have to pay the most. So it's kind of ridiculous. Now, there are all sorts of reasons, some are accurate, some are not, why this is the case. There is the argument of things like VAT, value-added tax. That is only partially true based on my research. There's also the stupid and retarded argument, in my view, that people just like rounded numbers, right? So depending on the research you do, you'll get all kinds of answers to this question. But at the end of the day, we in Europe pay in pain. We have to pay more than you do in the United States for exactly the same game. Now, there is a little bit of flexibility with respect to local currencies and local earnings. So for example, in Switzerland, you typically earn quite well. But relatively speaking, as much as I love Poland, we have to acknowledge people in Poland on average don't have a great salary compared to the people in Switzerland. And on average, it is worse than, say, places like the Netherlands or Germany or Belgium. And that's no slight on the Polish. I love the Polish. But the reality is here that they're not earning locally enough to justify a price of $93.18. Because what should be done here, and what is sometimes done in some places in the world, for some reason not in Europe, or at least not in most places in Europe, is that the price should be adjusted based on things like median salary, based on things like, currency and purchasing power and other factors. And yet they don't do that. Why are they doing this? Because they can, basically. They can get away with it. And again, they are aiming for Game Pass subscriptions. They don't care that the actual digital copy costs more than $90. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's bad enough in the Eurozone. And I wasn't even sure exactly how much more the Polish have to pay. But when I saw this, I thought, that is just nuts. So yes, the elephant in the room is we always pay more than you do in the United States for the exact bloody same game, no matter what the game is. And this has been this way for over 2 decades, at least. Now, the problem fundamentally here is that this is never going to change. And I know that Microsoft doesn't care, but I guarantee you in most cases, this is not going to encourage the subscription to Game Pass. Rather, it's going to encourage the opposite. It's going to encourage piracy. People are going to look at these prices and think, I have to pay over $90, in the case of Switzerland, almost $100 for a game that isn't going to be amazing. It's going to be okay to good, I imagine. No way. I'm just going to pirate the game. And guess what? The people who pirate these games, they're going to have access to it within day one. So I'm not sure if Microsoft is really thinking with their head. Maybe they really don't care. Maybe the Game Pass subscriptions will be good enough. Allegedly, they were good enough for Avowed, which cost 70 USD, i.e. was much more expensive here in Europe. I just thought this was important to bring this to your attention from a European perspective in terms of the amount of money we have to spend on games compared to you. Because everyone who talks about this, understandably, obviously, is American, and they talk about it from an America-centric point of view, which I totally get. America is basically the center, ground zero, as it were, for media, for video games, so it totally makes sense. But the European market for video games is pretty big too, and we also spend a lot of money on video games. And the proof is in the pudding. The fact that most of us have been willing to shell out even more money than most Americans do for the exact same game. Now, on top of that, to add a little bit of a tidbit of information here, the same is true for computer parts. Computer parts, if you want to build your own PC, they're typically significantly more expensive in Europe than they are in the United States. So that's another thing, although it's technically unrelated to this. Now, I know a lot less about places like Southeast Asia. I've heard, for example, that the marsupial people in the land down under have to pay 120 kangaroo dollars. Now, mind you, that's actually not that bad because it's less expensive than the European equivalent. In fact, in Australia, the price is much more adjusted in terms of currency exchange rates than it is in Europe. So, regardless, the rest of the world tends to have to pay different prices. I think we in Europe have to pay the highest prices for all the games, and we just accept it. But in this case, it's just too much. There is no way I am actually buying this game, and I'm also probably not going to get it on Game Pass. And on top of that, screw the stupid capitalism meme. I mean, I'm thinking about making an entire video about the fall of Obsidian, how they just bought into Microsoft, and they just allow Microsoft to run roughshod over their games in terms of the pricing. I get the whole history of how they were desperate and needed financial security, but I think they made a deal with the devil ultimately, and it's not looking very good. So yeah, I think probably in the long run, Microsoft will win. They will get their subscriptions for Game Pass. Some people will spend 80 or, in the case of we in Europe, over $90 for this game, but I'm certainly not going to be the one. So that's what I have to say about this. But in any event, as always, thank you for tuning in. If you like my videos and you like my takes, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. It's much appreciated, as it really helps out the channel, and I'll check you out next time. Take care.